welcome to your module on writing sexy essays. Today we're going to learn about what a sexy essay is, and we're also going to learn how to write a sexy essay. Anytime you're studying ethical or moral dilemmas, you have to make sure that your thinking about the subject is being kept in check. That is, you are analyzing all potential bits of information that could help you understand the item. You're also excluding those bits of information that are irrelevant to whatever the topic is. Anytime you're keeping your thinking in check, you gotta do something, and that something is keep it sexy. Now, for the purposes of GMC 154, we're going to be writing sexy essays on a variety of ethical or moral dilemmas that we discover and research throughout the next few weeks. The first thing we're going to do with our Keep It Sexy essay, this is an acronym, by the way. The acronym stands for state, elaborate, exemplify, and finally, illustrate. We're going to go through each one of these sections one by one, and then we're going to get a little practice with keeping it sexy. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is the statement section. Whenever you're keeping it sexy, you should be able to restate whatever the problem, whatever the issue is, in your own words. You should also be able to do this using clear and concise wording, just to make sure that your argument is very easy to identify. Let's have a look at an example of a poorly written statement. And we're going to use gun control as our topic for this particular paper. Now, an example of a poorly written statement. Gun control has its advantages, but it can also lead to negative consequences. Now, why is that a poorly written statement? Is it clear? Yeah, it's pretty clear. There are advantages, there are consequences, sure. Is it concise? Yeah, it's nice and short, gets to the point. Not really sure what that point is. Is the argument easy to identify? Not so much. The author of this statement starts out by saying that there are advantages to gun control, but then they follow it up with talking about the negative consequences. This author has clearly not taken a stand on the issue of gun control. Let's have a look at another example. Government has no right to limit the possession and use of firearms because of the Second Amendment. Guns are needed for hunting, and illegal gun ownership will happen with or without laws. Now, if we're asking ourselves what makes this a well-written statement, it's clear. We see that we've got a very clear stance being taken on the rights of government to limit the possession and use of firearms. The wording is concise. There are no extraneous words, no irrelevant language going on. And we can very clearly identify this author's argument. This author believes that government has no right to limit the possession and use of firearms, and then they give us a few reasons why. We're going to be revisiting those few reasons why, so keep those in mind. Those of you that have taken an English composition course, you may recognize this statement as something else. And that something else is a thesis statement. And here we have the formula for writing a good, strong thesis statement. In short, each of your statements should be in this following form. You're going to have an evaluative argument, the word because, and then you're going to follow up with 3 solid reasons that support that initial evaluation. Now, an evaluative argument is nothing more than a statement of evaluation. Saying something is good, saying something is bad, it's interesting, it's ethical, it's unethical. Any adjective that you can apply to the topic, that's an evaluation. How about some examples? Evaluative argument. Girls like diamonds because reason A, they are expensive. Reason B, they're sparkly. And reason C, they are beautiful. How about another? My brother is difficult to live with because he expects me to cook for him, he doesn't have a job, and he likes to boss me around. In effect, your thesis statement is going to prepare your reader for the rest of your sexy essay. We're going to use each of these reasons that you came up with in your statement in our elaboration. When you're keeping it sexy, you gotta be able to elaborate and explain what you're studying. When you do an effective elaboration, you go way beyond that brief paraphrase and you go into a realm of deep understanding. A good elaboration is going to include at least 3 paragraphs that support the claims you made in your statement. Each of those claims will become your topic sentences for your elaboration. We're going to go back to those points that we made in the gun control statement. Point 1, the Second Amendment guarantees our right to bear arms. We're going to expand on that statement, really explain it, turn it into a big paragraph. Point 2, we're going to go back to those claims. Many Americans are hunters of wild game. They need guns to hunt, especially large game. That's our topic sentence. What we need to do is explain what we mean by that. And then finally, illegal gun ownership will happen with or without the government's consent. Again, that's a point that we used in our statement. So we're going to elaborate on it. We're going to stretch it out, really explain what we mean about illegal gun ownership. Now, the elaboration is typically the longest portion of your SEXI essay because that's where you're putting the most information in. This is where, if you were writing a full research paper, you would be using your evidence, your explanations, your examples, which leads me to the third section of your SEXI essay, which is the exemplify portion. When you're keeping it sexy, you should be able to use good, strong examples to get your point across. Your example should tell a story. It should be a narrative. Whenever you include examples, you're allowing your reader to have a real-life experience of what it would be like to have stronger gun control laws or to not have gun control laws, or whatever the topic is that you're writing about. When your example tells a story, it should put your reader in a situation where they say, "Gosh, I'm glad I wasn't in that situation." How about an example? A homeowner, suddenly confronted by a knife-wielding intruder, reaches desperately for a handgun with which to defend himself. Before the assailant can strike, the homeowner aims and fires, protecting his family and property. Without the right to bear arms, this homeowner may have fallen victim to this home invader. All right, take a moment, step outside of yourself. Think about if you were resting in your bed one evening and someone came into your home with a knife prepared to harm you. Wouldn't you want to have access to your gun so that you could protect your family and your property? If so, this example was an effective example. It put you, the reader, in a situation where you had no choice but to agree. People need their guns. Now, the final section of the SEXI essay is the illustration. And this is where you can get really creative. Those of you that write poetry or that write song lyrics, you're not going to have any problem with the illustration. This is what you already do naturally. For the rest of us, though, we're going to have to come up with a way to compare our topic to something else. You want to ask yourself, what is this situation like? Answer that question and then form your comparison based on the answer. Your comparison can be made using metaphor, analogy, simile, any sort of literary device. You can use visual images, you can use charts, diagrams. Essentially, what you want to do is drive that point home. Let's look at a couple of examples. The first example, effective gun control is like setting your sights on safety for all citizens. This example is using some wordplay, a play on the word setting your sights. Example 2, gun control, making a safer work environment for your local rapists and burglars. Here we're using sarcasm, we're using a bit of irony. We're letting those readers know gun control laws make work environments safer for the bad guys, not for the good guys. And then finally, a third example. If you can't come up with the words, you may find an image or a picture or a diagram that expresses what you're saying. So here we have, this is a gun-free zone. In case of emergency, call 911, then crawl to the nearest exit. If help is delayed in arriving, kiss your defenseless butt goodbye. We're using humor here, we're using irony and hyperbole, but we're also using a visual image that should incite your reader to say, huh, I am not in favor of government imposing new laws on my guns. Now that you've seen each of the 4 portions of the SEXI essay, I think we ought to have a little practice. Your assignment is to develop a SEXI essay on one of the topics that you see listed here. As you're developing your SEXI essay, ask yourself, what is the problem? Can you elaborate on the problem? Can you provide an example? And can you illustrate the problem? Remember to go back to each of those 4 sections. Write a good, strong thesis statement. Use those points in your thesis statement for your elaboration. Really stretch them out, spread them out, give us some good details. Tell us a story about a time when your topic was needed, or maybe when it wasn't needed. Also, compare your topic to something else. This next slide is a sample of the rubric that I use to grade SEXI essays. If you look at the different categories, you can see that we'll be looking at your statement, your elaboration, your example, your illustration. We'll also be looking at the grammar and mechanics of your essay, as well as the overall feel of your essay. There are categories that are above the standard, some that meet the standard, some that are approaching the standard. There are below standard essays, and then there are essays that have each of those elements not present. When you're looking for an above standard SEXI essay, you want a statement that is exceptionally clear and concise with an easily identified argument. You want an elaboration that follows from that statement with details that clearly support the argument that you're making. You want an example that is a real-world example that really gives us an exceptional understanding of the arguments that you're making. You also want to use a comparison that is metaphor, simile, analogy, literary based. Note that a 4-level illustration can be made using a chart, a diagram, or a graph. A 3-level illustration can be made using a drawing or a doodle. A 2-level illustration is a comparison that just doesn't work with the argument. It doesn't support what you're trying to say. We're going to be looking at your grammar and mechanics. A 5-level SEXI essay is going to follow the MLA format and is going to follow the conventions of written English. That is punctuation, grammar, it's all there and it's all correct. Finally, we're going to look at how engaging and how academic the essay is. The more engaging it is, the more points you'll get. So, be sure to follow the directions on the course page for uploading your practice SEXI essay, and I'm available if you have questions. Happy hunting!